The street and buildings were all shaking. The world was shaking. The great big bronze bell was rocking from side to side and screaming its loud dong, dong. But no one could hear it. A crackling sound from the ground below triumphed in all ears. Who could miss to hear the street being ripped open? A huge crack opened fast and moved between Orisa's feet. She looked down and saw the ground moving apart. She wasn't fast enough. One part of the ground moved up while the other went down. Her two legs, that were standing on different sides, followed the same. She lost her bearings and started to fall backwards, where the ground beneath her was starting to open up like a crater. Her one foot remained on solid ground, and that saved her. She was able to grab on the top of this new cliff during her fall. Her left foot heel and her left hand were holding her up. 3 seconds ago she had been standing on solid ground in the open street. Now she was hanging on this cliff looking down at the crater that had been cut through the center of town. It must be a 40 meters fall. She could see the water flowing far down beneath her. Must be the water the town drank from and collected through the wells. There were people swimming with panic in the water stream. Not many from this area could swim. Orisa couldn't. Down there was certain death. The city was now split in two. The part Orisa was hanging on was rising higher and higher above the other side of the crater. As this shaking went on from the earthquake, buildings started to crumble and fall. This land was known for its sweet oases and calm deserts. None had ever seen the likes of this before. Screams and anguish echoed through the streets. None could hear it, however. The buildings falling apart was too loud. Orisa could see a goat tied to a pole, unable to get away. The animal could only watch the huge stone building falling down and crushing it alive. Death was everywhere and unavoidable. Everyone was trying to escape it, but no one could miss to see people get swollen up by the ground or crushed by stone. Orisa were trying with all her might to hold on where she was, even though the world was rocking her wild. Somehow she was able to hold her grip on the cliffside and just wait it out. She managed to hold fast to the very end and dragged herself up safely once again. With the buildings in ruins, she could see across the entire city. Everything was open. Normally you couldn't see past the house walls when you walked in the street. Now she could see the great walls in the edge of town. But Orisa didn't pay any attention to any of that or the nice view. All she could see was dead people everywhere, and if she couldn't really see all of them, she could realize she was walking over them, where just hands and legs popped out through the stone. Panic and cries was heard from all directions. People was running around and digging in all different places. Orisa looked up towards the palace. The capital's great palace that had stood for centuries was all gone in ruin. She wondered if the young sultan was alive. If he wasn't, there were no heir to the throne. Could this be the end of this great empire? Would we lose to anarchy or civil war without a ruler? What would other nations do with this? It is scary to think about what a simple natural disaster could do. The Sultan had approved to send the armies north. Now the conquest was lost to a silly earthquake. The armies in north just had to come back home. Her daydreaming reasoning was interrupted by a large cry from a tiny baby. Next to the baby was a hand coming straight up through the ground, like it was trying to grab onto something. Orisa reached out and touched it. The hand was dead cold and hard like bone. This wasn't the first time she had touched a dead person, so she knew. The person down below the rubble was indeed dead. It was a woman's hand, so it was surely this baby's mother. There were no clear father anywhere to be seen. There were, of course, a lot of men running around and digging, but no one that seemed to claim this child. Orisa knew of an orphanage, and she also knew of a doctor's private clinic, or maybe the temple. In any case, staying here might be dangerous. Buildings were still collapsing. She grabbed the baby and started with the temple. She knew some of the people there. When Orisa started to press on, she came back thinking about the Sultan. He had been a young boy to inherit the throne. He might be alive, and all her speculations was of nothing. Or he might be dead, and this wasn't going to be a safe place to stay in. Who would pay soldiers? Who would keep order in the streets? Who would try and become a new ruler? No, that was a stupid question. She knew her people too well. Everyone would try to become a new ruler. At least everyone with vast amount of money and influence. Orisa had read this nation's history with great detail. There had been many civil wars in the past about who was going to be in charge. But then and there she made a stop in the middle of what was left of the street, because she could see from far away now that there was nothing left of the old temple, or some parts of it was left, but it was currently undergoing collapse. Not so good to be there, not for a crawling baby. She turned for orphanage. The orphanage was closer, and kept walking with the little one on her back. Her mind came back to where the earthquake started. Orisa was a fortune teller and told people's future for money. She worked in the center of the market and always had a close shop to buy food from. And just when she decided to leave her seat and go for something to eat, all hell broke loose. She had thought that she would die, but here she are, still alive, trying to do the right thing with this baby something. But Orisa couldn't stop wondering why she hadn't predicted this disaster. Future and past was her hobby. She predicted many things, even though she wasn't even paid. And according to all signs, it was supposed to be a sweet, gentle day. Maybe she wasn't talented at all, or just lost her craft. But one thing she was certain of: nothing happens without a reason. That was why she took up this occupation, figuring things out, learning why things happened the way they happened. And all her customers was deeply interesting to her, and she always dug deep in their palm, finding clues and answer to why everything would happen to them. So what was the reason behind this earthquake? But nothing, and that was also what was left of the orphanage. There were, however, a lot of animals running around here. Camels, birds, and some ox. One did look like Oxard, and on top of the orphanage sat one hyena. It was far away, but it did look like the hyena glared at her. She had seen many hyenas before. They weren't that far from the savannah, but not in town. Then again, she knew a couple of rumors about a loan shark that owned crocodiles. People that failed to pay is said to have been feeded to them. Most likely those crocs were buried alive inside their cage, wherever in town they were. However, they might swim around in that river, having a feast right now. In any case, this was a dead end, and the baby's last hope. She realized that her friend, the doctor, that owned a private clinic, was on the other side of town, on the other side of that river. She didn't know how she would cross that big crater, and in no way would someone have built a bridge during the last hour. And her friend was probably swamped with people on the verge of death, and this baby wasn't even in the need of a bandage. So she sat down and put the child on her knee. "So, what am I going to do with you?" she asked the little one, without expecting an answer. "You see, I have to go on a journey here. There is some place that I just have to pay some visit." The child had stopped crying and just looked at this strange young woman. Orisa knew She couldn't just leave the baby right here. But what to do? What should she do? And if you like this story, why not leave a comment below on that?